Well, hello, everybody. I'm Kelvin Redd, and I want to welcome you to the Define Your Destiny podcast. It's a show where we take leaders who are on this journey towards self awareness. In my line of work, I get an opportunity to meet people from all across this country. Some of them are not world known or world renowned. However, they're very influential in their respective communities, and none more than my special guest today, Dr. Devin Stephenson, who is the president and CEO of Northwest Florida State College. Welcome, sir.
Kelvin, it's great to be with you today. Of course, we think the world of your work, the world of work in emergenetics, and you've been a great blessing to our college here and to our people as we've taken them on various leadership journeys. But I'm deeply honored to be asked to be a part of your podcast today, and look forward to this chat very much.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words. Well, this is a place where we always want to start by telling your story. So, where did Dr. Devin Stephenson come from? Where are you from?
Actually, from Alabama,
Mhm.
not far from Birmingham, Alabama, in a small town called Jasper.
Know it very
So,
well.
yep. So, yeah, you've done some work over there.
Yeah.
My father was a state trooper. Actually, he worked on the railroad, then
Hmm.
ended up as a World War II veteran, served in Burma, then
Hmm.
became an Alabama state trooper. And I don't think I've ever told you this, but he was a personal bodyguard for Governor Big Jim Folsom for a number of years, handpicked to be his bodyguard and driver, and
Really?
then later became assistant director for the Alabama Department of Labor, and negotiated many major things in Alabama, including all of the work that went on when Werner von Braun was developing the Saturn rocket booster at
Wow.
Redstone Arsenal. So you can imagine growing up in a home with a father that had been a sergeant in the Army, an
Hmm.
Alabama trooper, an Alabama highway patrolman, a
Yeah.
labor negotiator, and the type of immersive education you got there just by
Yes.
listening and observing.
Well,
Uh,
I want to pause right there because
yeah,
we have something
no,
in common in that regard with our fathers. I'm a huge believer in vicarious learning.
oh
What
yeah,
did you learn from your father with those experiences of just listening to him and
it's
observing?
oh yeah, it is obvious that it was not as much about um, the knowledge you had, but
Mhm.
the application of that knowledge,
Yes.
and learning to learn and continuing that pursuit of lifelong learning.
Yes.
My father and my mother, who's a delight, my mother is 96.
Great
She
genes.
worked
I've
for
seen it.
45 years as an executive secretary,
Uh-huh.
and both of them had their own way of teaching us,
Yes.
but it was a lot by speech, by talk. Let me share with you why that would be a good decision or that would not be a good decision. So they framed it up and basically said, we want you all to be excellent at everything that you do.
Mm.
And so my mother had a term that she used. She didn't use the word excellent. She just said, I don't want you to be common or
Ooh.
average or
Mm.
mediocre.
Mm-mm.
Always rise above that in everything that you do. My
Wow.
dad was a strict disciplinarian. So what we got from dad and mom both, but dad more so, were strong value clarifications very early on.
Uh-huh.
And so it was like very early we learned that you better be honest,
Yes.
you better have integrity, and you better be trustworthy.
Yes.
You better respect all people, no matter where they're from, what they look like. You better respect them. Commit yourself to excellence. And then the most important to him really was you got to have a strong work ethic.
Right.
And because things don't just come to you, you got to work for it.
Mm.
So growing up in that house and listening, and my dad was a craftsman.
Mm.
He was an artist. He could carve. He built his own. Wood. What do you call it? Wood splitter.
Hmm.
He built his own. He could just do marvelous work. He built the very first crib, which was huge, ornately turned legs for our son. And so I learned that nothing comes easy. And if you want to excel in life, you've got to work at it. And you've got to learn to work both hard and learn to work smart. And they continued that as long as he lived. And my mother still does. Believe me, we go back and she's always got that little tidbit, that little word, that you're
Yes.
expecting from her. And so we were sort of immersed in all of that. And it became a part of us organically. So I think that was the driving force. As you know, I firmly believe in clarifying your values.
Yes.
Because if you don't know who you are, you won't get to where you want to get to. You've got to know who you are and how that fits into the big picture. And so I took all the things that I'd learned. There were basically 6 of those values and memorized them through an acrostic. So every morning I get up, I recall those 6. And I really say, God, help me today be the honest person you want me to be a person of integrity. Let me be trustworthy. No matter who I come in contact with today, let me share some ray of hope, some sunshine there. Let me respect all people. Mostly, let me be a person of excellence in everything I do. And then finally, let me display that strong work ethic so others around me will see that it does pay off.
I love hearing you tell those stories. I can see where you have this strong foundation for a love of leadership. You're growing up, you're in Jasper, Alabama, your teenage years. I like to ask my guests this question. Did you ever think when you were growing up that you would be doing what you're doing now? Like, what
Heck
were your
no.
dreams as a child, as a teenager?
No, actually, I was sort of the introvert. I would despise to get to class, whether, regardless,
Yes.
whether it was in middle school or high school, late, because I was afraid everybody would be watching me. I was the
Yes.
introvert kind of person.
Yes.
And what I learned is that over time, leadership is not a science. Leadership is an art, and you learn to do it better. And so literally I forced myself into I guess a lot of people say, man, you're an extrovert as such. You don't meet a stranger. You're comfortable with people. And so I literally had to push myself into that. But I do want to tell you the entrepreneurial part of me, and believe me, my undergraduate degrees from Birmingham Southern in business, not education.
Yes.
But
Okay.
early on, my sister and I developed a little small business, and she would make pot holders, weave them, and I would get on the bicycle right through the neighborhood, and I was the salesman. And so during the summer, we had this little business of she made the pot holders, and then I would go sell them. And of course, people were very generous. They could use, that was something they could use. So I learned to be an entrepreneur very early on. Our parents always wanted us to look and do things a little different, not just lay around the house during the summer and watch our math skills digress. They wanted us to be doing something all the time. And so that was a significant part of the growing experience. And not only did we get their teaching by verbal communication, but their encouragement was something that was invaluable to us. They would always tell us, this is great. You need to do this more. And here's how you might improve that. And that's how I learned, and that's how I developed my four T's. And that is, you train people, you trust them to do the job, you turn them loose, and then you thank them.
Love it.
And those 4 T's, they're magic. And a lot of leaders, as you know, Kelvin, don't want to share the credit. And that's the biggest mistake in the world, because if you empower people and then affirm them, they will work toward the goal that you've established.
And it makes your life as the leader so much easier.
Oh man,
it takes
that's
tremendous
right.
amount of stress
That's
off
right.
of you.
That's right. And so over time, I've been at Northwest Florida State College now. I'm in my 8th year. And so what I believe is that in the life cycle of an organization, in the life cycle of a leader, there are different phases that we go through. And so
Yes.
the first 2 years, I spent a lot of time getting to know people inside the college, and I also built relationships outside the college. And then
Mm.
once I sort of felt like I learned the internal workings of the college, I began to
Mhm.
move out and develop those externally, those extrinsic kinds of relationships that are so valuable to a higher ed leader now.
Mhm.
And you know yourself, you've done this a lot. If you're not a friend raiser, and if you're not a fundraiser, you're not going to be successful as a
Oh, I
president. You're
love
just
that
not.
term, friend raiser. I love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
you're just not. You're not going to be successful. So cyclically, we've gone over different periods and stages of the
Mhm.
organization as we've watched it elevate. And I'm going to tell you, we'll probably talk about some of our accomplishments a little later on in the podcast, but
Mhm.
we believe right now, and I've declared it, we're in a position of resetting. We're
Mm.
in a very, very strong position to reset the model. We have had a little bit of churn in our higher uh, executive leadership level. We lost a vice president who went to a larger institution. And
Mhm.
of course, that's what I love to do, is take our people and
Yes.
grow them and help
Yes.
lift them. But we are in a reset type of a position of this year, we're looking at where do we want to go for the next 3 to 5 years.
Well,
And
pause that for us. Let me ask you a question. So I want to just jump right into this. 2020 comes and we're in a pandemic.
oh,
And what I noticed was a lot of folks in education, my business clients, they have virtual meetings all the time. It was no big deal. Some of the folks in education, it hit them like a ton of bricks.
yeah,
News stories about, teachers leaving the profession and what have you. What were your takeaways from the profession itself from the pandemic? And how have you utilized that so that you can go forward?
I don't want to say that that we were prophets in a nonprofit organization,
Yeah.
but for some reason, I had this idea that we needed to foster and develop our own online learning platform.
Okay.
So about 20 to 25% of our students were online, but I could
Mhm.
see it coming. It's almost
Yes.
like a tsunami coming right at you. It's like
Yes.
that hurricane coming up the
Yeah.
Gulf right at you.
And not even necessarily because of the pandemic, because
No,
that
no,
is the wave of the future.
yeah, and
Yes.
we were ahead of that. So what we did, we created a center for, oh, this is beautiful, a center for innovative teaching and learning, and it came as an idea out of the President's Leadership Academy that
Oh, wow.
you've taught for us. You've been a part with us our entire journey. So what we do is we have these demonstration projects that
Yes.
teams put together, and the very first class put together one called the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. And I thought, you know, we're going to create a highly engaged classroom by using this initiative to train faculty. But why don't we also set up an online campus where we
Wow.
actually focus on delivering more online? So we were ahead of the curve. I'll just tell you,
Mm.
we were ahead.
Okay.
While other schools were sort of scrambling around a little bit, trying to figure out how do we get everybody online,
Yes.
we were able to pivot so quickly
Wow.
uh, because of being able to, be a little ahead of our time in that regard. And I
Uh-huh.
had very energetic people. And I will say this, Kelvin, as you teach,
Mhm.
you can't have the same demographic, the same style of leadership around the table. Everybody looks the same. Everybody talks the same. You can't have a bunch of yes people around the table. You got to have different thinkers. So we're
Mhm.
full of Gen Zs. I've got Gen X's. I've got millennials around. And we sit around the table, and I don't look for the yeses. I want them to
Yes.
refine the ideas. So
Right.
we stood that online campus up. And when we shut this college down on March the 13th of
Yes.
2020,
Mhm.
we pivoted just like that. Just
Wow.
like that. The most painful part was remote working for people that were like our navigators, our financial
Mhm.
aid in folks. That
Yes.
was the biggest challenge because they were doing more face to face, which is my preference. I'll be honest with you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a remote worker. I believe our business is people, and we need to be
Yes.
where people are, and that kinesthetic part of being able to
Yes.
react and respond. But it was amazing So by July 1st, we had almost all of our people back to work, but our enrollment suffered, as it
Yeah.
did in many, many places.
Mhm.
And Kelvin, you know me, I've never been able to go to a place, being an old dean of students, an old recruiting head, that I haven't been able to grow enrollment. And there about 4 semesters after the pandemic, I began to think, am I capable of doing this again? I've had success at every other place.
Mhm.
We grew Three Rivers College in Missouri 50% in a matter of like
Wow.
3 years. So we went from 2,000 students to over 4,000 students. We
Wow.
built new facilities in the outlying service area, and I began to question: do I have the ability anymore as a leader to make this change? As Michael Jackson said, you got to make the
Yes.
change, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and so over time, we began looking at how do we market,
Yes.
how do we deliver, how do we send a message that's a little different? No longer are we going to say something like, Northwest Florida State College is a great place to go. It's high quality. You need to come. We started
Mhm.
marketing by putting things out like, you want to earn $2,000 a week? Check our welding program. So
Yes.
we started marketing differently. And here's the beautiful part. This podcast could not come at a better time. Last week was the end of our drop ad period. We had a 12% enrollment increase over this time last year, and it's our 7th consecutive semester of enrollment increase.
Mhm.
7th.
Wow.
Consistent growth. And so I think it's a lesson in, you got to believe in yourself, and you
Mhm.
can't, I was almost at that point, but the thread had really gotten thin to where I was saying, man, do I have the ability to be able to put the team together, motivate the team, to make this happen? And now, boy, everybody's so excited because, as you know, a 12% enrollment
Oh,
increase
that's huge.
is huge.
Yeah.
And it's probably the top in Florida. I don't know of any other state college in Florida that's had 7 consecutive semesters of enrollment increases.
Well,
Uh,
now, I want to ask you that based upon that, because this is almost like a 2 to 3 part question. Now, I know your emergenetics profile. You are a big picture thinker. You're assertive. You're assertive. You're always on the move. What is it like to be a big picture, conceptual, creative thinker in an industry that has typically kind of been kind of slow?
we're real slow.
Yeah.
Higher ed
Yes.
typically is slow.
So do
Well,
you ever lead from a standpoint where, I mean, I know you, I don't, I'm going to assume, and I probably shouldn't assume, that a lot of nights you don't sleep very well because you got all these ideas going in your head. I don't
right.
know. But when you come into work and you have these ideas and you want to get them done, let's get it done. But yet higher education doesn't move that fast. How do you maneuver through that?
Well, just so you know, I like to write things down. I was on a panel last week for the Florida Chamber of Commerce, the only higher ed president in the state of Florida that got to be there and be able to talk about the growth that they wanted to know about, our growth in growing health programs,
Yes.
nursing, and our grant acquisitions, as you know, like 70 plus million in 4 years in grants. It's just unheard of. But when I sat down, I was with the dean of the College of Medicine of Florida State to my left. She was wonderful. And then the moderator was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company that's on the Florida Chamber Board. Both of them pull out their little digital iPhones, and they're reading all their notes. And I come in and I got a pad of paper. And so the first thing I said is, this is the perfect lesson in generational preferences. And I said,
Yes.
here I am, the baby boomer, and I've got my paper.
Yes.
And these two are doing very efficient work, but they're trusting the digital world to do it in.
Yes.
And I really think that being able to, as a baby boomer, to navigate the changes in technology with this team that's in many cases much younger than I am, but I brought them all here, has helped to be able to move the organization, because I have to live in their world
Yes.
like they have to live in my world.
Yes.
And so what happens in this dynamic, and this is my to-do list. So if you flip through this is how I stay on task.
Yes.
And it's multiple pages marked, but it helps keep me on track. And I always bring these to my President's Circle meeting and challenge everybody to think ahead.
Yes.
Well, here's what I found out. I found out that the younger generation of baby busters, of Gen X's and millennials move at a faster rate of speed. They are more bored. They get bored quickly.
Yes.
Keeping their attention. I mean, they got the shortest attention span ever.
Yes.
So I am constantly throwing out ideas, and I firmly believe effective leaders keep the next great idea waiting in the wings.
Yes.
Effective leaders keep the next great idea waiting in the wings, and at the right time, we bring it out and we throw that idea out so that I basically capture the imagination. And it's very appropriate to do that in Florida, where we have Disney and we do a lot of Imagineering.
Yes,
So you capture that imagination, and they begin thinking about, how can I be the answer to Stevenson's wildly important idea of the day? And so that has created a dynamic now where we realize, and I finally convinced everybody, we have to operate at the speed of business, not at the speed of education.
Okay. Pause right there.
Right.
I wrote down after you told me of your entrepreneurial mindset. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, no wonder he's such a tremendous leader. He has a business mindset in education.
That's
now,
right.
With me saying that, please expound.
Okay. All right. So I for years in higher education, presidents would have president's cabinet meetings.
Yes.
Probably heard about it. I mean, we get all our vice presidents around the table, and everybody says, well, here's what we're doing this week, or here's what we're doing that week. And it's just basically a regurgitation of things.
Yes.
Now, I said things.
Yes.
So I decided I'm going to change that entire paradigm. We're not going to have a president's cabinet. We're going to create a president's strategy circle. And so when I moved into the new office complex here, I had them build a new conference table. And the conference table is round. You've probably seen it. It's some people come in, they say, this is like King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table. It's not for that purpose. It's to create a culture, an infrastructure that fosters ideas, strategies, that challenges the status quo. And we don't just talk about things.
Yes.
We talk about what can be.
Yes.
And if it's good, as you know, Jim Collins said, good is the enemy of great. People will just buy into good. Well, not me. I like Vince Lombardi when he said, you'll never catch perfection, but if you'll run after it, you'll catch excellence. And I believe that. I really believe that. Mario Andretti, the great race car driver, said that desire is the key to motivation. You can have a desire. You teach this all the time in emergenetics. You can have a desire, but the unrelenting pursuit of excellence will set apart the mediocre from the average. I mean, the mediocre from the great. And so what we do is we sit around that table. I allow them to present some concepts and ideas, and I develop the agenda because I want to know how am I going to moderate this.
Yes.
And then as I go into the meetings, my purpose, I believe, is not only facilitator, but to challenge.
Yes.
To challenge why. It's why. And then after that, it's why. So we have this very robust dynamic that's going on where we're creating literally while we're flying this airplane. And that's very appropriate considering we serve Eglin Air Force Base over here.
Yes.
We often say that we're building this airplane while we're in flight.
I love it.
But I do think that model, and this is funny. This is really funny. So I'm interviewing an associate vice president yesterday.
Okay.
I did it by telephone. This was like a second follow-up. And I said, well, do you have any questions? And she said, yeah. She said, now check this out. She came for interviews last week. The last interview before she met with me was with the strategy circle. So I put the strategy circle in there and I say, the candidate's going to come in there. And I've got these really wild interview questions. I mean, they're wild. Nothing like you would typically ask. Like,
Love it.
what color's your brain and why?
Oh, I love it.
Or tell me about a time when you were criticized by a subordinate and how you, by someone, and how you reacted and responded to that. I mean, these are questions that are very thought provoking. They're not yes and no questions.
Yes.
But when I was talking to her on the phone, got down to the end and I said, all right, any questions? She said, yeah. I spent all day on your campus. She said, that culture is unbelievable. Would I have the opportunity as an associate vice president to sit on your strategy circle?
Whoa.
And I thought, whoa. She said, that was the most dynamic thing I've ever seen in higher ed. And she said, that's why I would want to work with you and work with that college. So I think by changing up that dynamic so that vice presidents aren't just coming to these meetings, and we meet every other week, and just saying what they've done, I don't want to hear that. I can read that on a piece of paper in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Tell me how we're going to make this better.
Yes.
What are we going to do to better serve students and make it better? So in actuality, what we've done is we've created a business model here, and we measure everything we do. I became a very strong follower of Stephen Covey and McChesney's 4 disciplines of execution.
Okay.
And so we use the cadence of accountability as a major piece of what we do. We hold people accountable. If I give you money in this budget year, I'm coming back next year in the budget cycle, and I'm going to ask you, what were the performance outcomes? And so I think for some people early on, that model made some folks uncomfortable. In higher ed, we haven't traditionally done that. But here, we see the results of pushing. We see the results of raising expectations. As you know, we have the #1 public charter high school in the state of Florida. We have 485 students this coming year. It's the #1 100% graduation rate, and the PSAT scores for the 10th grade just came out. And we outperformed every school district in the state of Florida, beat the national average. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Wow. And so what I'm constantly doing, when the nursing department comes and says, oh, we've got a 98% pass rate on the NCLEX RN, my next question is, why don't we have 100?
Wow.
So as you can imagine, that makes people feel a little uncomfortable. And at the same time, I'm affirming them for that number.
Well, especially in your industry, in education. Yes.
I'm going to affirm them, but I'm going to always challenge them to do better, because it's nothing that I'm not going to do for myself. I always want to improve what I'm doing.
Well, so to me, this is a great, I love it. And to me, this is a great segue, because we met, your son, Dr. Stephenson, introduced me to you. And when I came there, I was taken by the fact I was invited to come to speak to the President's Leadership Academy. It is Academy, right?
It is PLA.
PLA. So I come and I do the Emergenetics workshop, and I was taken. And in subsequent years, I get there and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know too many people in business or in education or in other nonprofits that have a system in place like you do. So if you will, talk to our viewers about the President's Leadership Academy, the PLA, and how it came about.
Yeah. Well, let me say that I believe professional development is critical for all of us in everything that we do. We, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that the work we do is an art. The work that you do in teaching people, if you didn't believe you could make them better leaders, you wouldn't do it. And so being someone who has taught and lectured on leadership, I thought, the best way to show people, what is that old saying? They don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yes.
I want to develop some of our emerging leaders here at the college. This is the third college that I've set up a President's Leadership Institute. In Alabama, I had the privilege of working to set up a youth leadership program in concert with the college and the chamber. But the reason I do it is because I want to see people grow.
Mm.
And if I make better leaders, I make a better institution.
Mm.
And here's the deal. I knew if I could start over a very short period of time, I would have the opportunity to get a large number of people meeting with me and helping them understand why I make the decisions that I make.
Mm.
So for 8 months in the year, I'm at every one of those PLAs. I speak at the beginning of them. I usually have a little leadership lesson. I want them inside my head to know, well, why did Stephenson make that decision? Well, if you're in PLA and you've been with me for 8 months, you can say to somebody that's sitting next to you in a cubicle, I went through PLA. I know what he's thinking, and this is why he did that. And so now we have close to 70 of our employees who have gone through the Leadership Institute. We developed it based upon the needs that we believe the institution had, the vacuum that it had. And here's the beautiful part. We opened it to every level of the college. So if you're a career service person working as a support individual at the institution and believe that you want to learn how to lead better.
So it's not just like only for cabinet members. It's got to be for yes. I love it. I love it.
Career service. And here's the deal. We will have 2 to 3 times the number of people that we can accommodate apply. And so Melissa, who, as you know, is my executive assistant, she helps coordinate the program. She does the lion's share of the work. We will sit down and say, all right, for this year's class, who are the 15 to 20 people from once we look at all the outs, that will be diverse, that we could make a real impact in their life, that would improve the overall service of the institution. We have a very scripted curriculum. And then I bring in a host of speakers, including the outstanding Kelvin Redd. I bring presidents from all over the country.
I've met some. Yes.
Yeah, I fly them in, and I want to get them that have come from different walks of life. And many of them started out as a secretary or a technician in maintenance.
Yes.
And they've elevated themselves. And so we commit a lot of money. I will tell you that we have a very robust foundation here, about 62 million in assets. And there's a significant amount of money that we get that's been endowed that allows us to create this and other. In fact, we're about to start a youth leadership. We'll be talking to you about that soon.
Oh, nice.
A youth leadership academy for the high schools in the district. But we just believe that our institution is better from having taken over 60, I think it's almost 70 of our employees through. And there's another thing. What I've discovered is that these people that start this program within 2 or 3 sessions will come to me afterwards and they'll say, man, I've got a different perspective about leadership. And I believe I can do more. I can do better. And we've seen them elevate to dean's positions, to vice president's positions. Several of them have even moved out into the corporate world as a result of going through and believing I can develop this skill. I can be better at what I do. So it's very rewarding. It's, we have all of the curriculum. The syllabus is well documented. The presenters are challenged at the highest level to make it meaningful and to touch, every area of life so that our people would be motivated. And there hasn't been one PLA that we've launched that someone will say to me, that person that spoke today, that's me.
Yes.
If she can become a college president after all the challenges that she's had in life, I can too.
Well, the thing that you said the thing that you said that really struck me, and I think it's so, so very important. You really want those people that you have been entrusted to serve to really understand your brain and understand you.
That's it.
And
That's
that's
it.
why when we do the emergenetics workshop, I always ask the leader, can I share your profile with the group
Yeah.
so they understand how you think and behave and won't take everything so out of context when you give a
Yeah.
directive or you set the vision or what have you.
That's right. You know, and let me say one other thing to you, and I think this is really important. So I communicate a lot here with our people. Very early on, 7 years ago, I told them to be watching for any emails. If an email ever had a subject line to keep you informed, you
Mhm.
better open it and read it, because it is substantive. And so everybody now, if an email comes through and it says to keep you informed, they
Oh, I
know they
love
better
it.
read it, because
I love it.
it could be anything, but it's going to be important. I do the same thing with trustees. I have
Yes.
8 trustees, and I give what I call a trustee update to them, and they
Mhm.
know if they're getting that email and that there is substantial information in there. There's information that needs to be shared that's important. So I think the thing that you're landing on that I think is so important here at this point is that communication
Mhm.
is the key to success. We know that the lion's share of businesses and organizations fail for 2 reasons: communication and poor interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
Um, those things will drive an organization into the ground. And so communicating, I had a board chair, the very first board chair I had, Brian Pennington. Brian Pennington was a very successful business, still is. I mean, he sold his business, but very successful.
Mhm.
And he said, Devin, you're doing a great job communicating, but just let me remind you, when you think you've communicated enough,
Mm.
communicate again.
Yeah.
And then after you communicate again, communicate again,
Mm.
because people receive everything on a different wavelength. I often believe that the way we were raised, the homes that we were raised in, the environment that we were raised in, temper our ability to be able to hear, not only receive the message,
Yeah.
but to transmit the message as well. So when I'm speaking, I will try to say the same thing, and I've heard you do this,
Uh-huh.
3 or 4 different ways, so that everybody in the room, but regardless of their perspective, regardless of their prejudices about anything,
Mhm.
whether or not they brush their teeth in the morning or at night, or
Yes. Yes.
any
Yes.
routine, they're going to get the message. They're going to hear me loud and strong. And so the PLA has helped us with the communication piece, know why I do what I do and why I make the decisions. Now, the to keep you informed email is not void of the why.
Yes.
I fill that communication with the why as well. Uh, and then I give the why over and over when I speak at convocation, at any time. I do a significant amount of video messaging to our people, where I'll
Nice.
go out on campus. We take a real high definition camera, great audio, and I will just basically say, "Got great news for you today." Blah 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 blah. I've also been known to set up a pop-up president's office. So I've got this little stand, and I'll go sit up outside the student center, and I won't even tell anybody, but I just sit down behind this little deal, and it says pop-up president's office. I want to talk to you. And I'll just sit down, and people come by. It's really sort of funny. But I do believe that the PLA has been a great tool for communication, and it's helped us a lot.
Well, let me ask you final 2 questions, because I'm listening to you and I'm just really enthralled with everything you're saying. Here's my question: your own personal development. What is your method of learning, and how much time do you do that? Like, I used to say that I was an avid reader, and I could read 1 book every 4 to 6 weeks. But because of my schedule, it's Audible now, it's podcasts, it's YouTube. And when I do have a chance to sit down and read, I will do it. What is your method of learning, and what does that look like?
That's really good. So I just turned around and grabbed a couple of books. I don't mind telling you, I'm not great at book reading.
Yes.
So it's difficult for me to sit down with a book
Yes.
and go through that whole book. It's more like bits and pieces.
Well, it's not difficult. It's your personality. We
It
talk
is.
about that. You are a
Yep.
conceptual thinker.
Right, right.
You're interested in the concept of the book.
That's right. So sitting
Yeah.
down and reading this one right here is 187 pages, and you can see how small those words are.
Yes.
So sitting down and reading all that might drive me crazy.
Yes.
And by the way, this is a great book. It just came out. Whatever it is, I'm against it. Resistance to Change in Higher Ed. And Brian Rosenberg was a former college president.
Okay.
And he wrote this book, and I saw him the other day on Fox, I believe, or CNN, one of them. And I told my assistant, I said, get this book. I've got to read it because it is so true. And then someone, a good friend of mine, sent me this wonderful Thomas Sowell book on social justice, the fallacies thereof.
Yes.
And so I just love to read all kinds of things.
Yes.
But it's not the book where I really learn.
Is it? Do you listen to podcasts? Is it Audible?
Some,
YouTube?
but I'm big on digital newsletters on the relevant material of the day.
Got it.
And so every morning I'm up early. I sit down at the table. I'm a breakfast eater. So my mother and grandmother always said, you're going to eat breakfast. You may not eat another meal, but you're going to get a good start.
Yes.
And so I'll sit down with my iPad and I have two favorite digital newsletters, but I've also set up an RSS feed to get information that comes to me on particular subjects in leadership. One of them is Inside Higher Ed. I read it. It's the best. And then I read also the community college digital newsletter out of the American Association of Community Colleges. But perhaps I get more good lessons from reading the political news of our state.
Okay.
And what was happening, because if you read several Politico, the Safety Review, these are going to give you subject matter in such broad areas.
Yes.
And I don't mind telling you, I'm a people observer.
Yes.
I watch what people say and I watch what people do. But more importantly, I watch what people do. One writer who was a great psychologist called it revealed preference. He said, people can wag their tongues all day long. They can say all they want to say. Just watch what they do, and that will tell you who they really are. And so watching people is really important, and observing what's going on in the state. And I had the most interesting life lesson on Tuesday of this week. I was in the Capitol. I went into the Senate President's office, and they're developing the budget. It's a very active time. But the senior policy advisor for the Senate is a wonderful lady. And we went in and we sat down. We talked about everything from, it really doesn't matter who gets the credit, just so we do good stuff.
Yes.
And she started telling me the story, and it was very brief, and it's just really what she does. It's not a story. She said, I have to tell you about my laundromat people. And I thought for a minute, I said, okay, Kathy, I would think that as many years as you've been doing this, you're a senior policy advisor. You're probably not going to the laundromat every week. You probably have a washer and dryer in your house. You're probably not doing that, but you may. And she said, Devin, I got to tell you, she said, you learn where people really are by going where they do whatever it is they do. And she said, I've learned so much. I go to the laundromat, and she said, now I may go once a month or once every 6 months. But she says, I go to observe people. I go to see what they're doing, because those are the lion's share of the people. And listen, here's what she said. She said, the last time I went, I realized you got all these kids running around the laundromat. They're making a lot of noise. Why don't we have them reading? So I came back and I called the local library and the local college. And I said, why don't you donate some books to the laundromat so these kids can be reading some and learning something? You know yourself, Kevin, if they're not reading up to par by the third, and at the third grade, they're going to, for the most.
Oh, I get it. My sister is an outstanding reading teacher.
All right. Okay.
She is her kids typically outperform
there you go
a lot of other classrooms.
Yeah.
I get, trust me, I come from that family.
Yeah.
Um,
So
as
Kathy,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
she had the library and the college put books
I
in the
love it.
laundromat, and she goes in now and she says, these kids are reading these books. They're simple, but they're reading. And so I really think that the people aspect of our work is the most important. I call it the who of the organization.
Mm,
And to be honest with you, it's our students. They're number one. They're the most
mhm,
important people on campus. And then our faculty who
mhm.
make the difference in the classroom.
Yes.
You know, you go back and you ask a grad, an alum, who made the most significant impact of your life at our college? It's not me.
Mhm,
It's not necessarily a navigator
mhm,
downstairs,
mhm,
but they'll name a faculty member,
mhm,
or they'll name a coach that taught them in a physical ed
mhm,
class or coached them.
mhm,
Those are the people. They're the who of the people that have those teachable moments that make a
mhm,
difference in people's lives. And so I really think um, making sure that we do a good job in creating a culture here that is welcoming, but that we do support
mhm.
and retain the good people, the who of the organization that are making those things happen. Because it's, hey, what people say about our institution is who we are.
Yep.
What students say about us is who we are. Not what I say. I can go out and say ours is the number one college. Forbes just named us, the top ADN to BSN program, one of the top 10 in America. That's well and good, but what do those
Yeah,
nursing students say when they graduate?
exactly.
So
Well, let
that's
me
important.
ask you this final question then.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot. I feel like I know you very well. When do you find time to rest and have some relaxation? And what does that look like?
That's good. Um, so I'm a classically trained pianist. I don't get up
Yes,
there and broadcast about it, but I perform
you told me
once
that.
a year with we have a really fine symphony. It's the finest one in my opinion on the Emerald Coast, and a performing arts center that's second to none. There's nobody has the performing arts center we have. It's just that way. Even if I weren't the president here, I would tell you the Maddie Kelly Arts Center is the best. But music is a therapy. Um, it's very therapeutic, and so I've got golf clubs, and I'll play from time to time, but nothing is more therapeutic than playing or creating music in a computer-driven notation software. Doing that is a mathematical uh, exercise because you
Yes.
can't put too many notes in a measure. It won't let you. You have to get everything correct, but it is an outlet. It is an outlet to sort of express yourself. Um, I also like, we have a home in Alabama on the lake, and
Uh-huh.
I do like to go up there, and we just bought a pontoon, and it's so relaxing just to get out on that lake and, just take it easy. Um, I I try not to think a lot about the college
Yes.
on weekends, but it's hard. A college president has that load 24/7, 365.
Yep.
But music has given me that outlet. I do love our athletic uh, programs here. All four of ours are ranked in the top 6 nationally right now as we speak. We have the reigning national champs in women's basketball and the national runners up in both men's basketball and softball. And so going to those games is very therapeutic. I was there last night for both our basketball games, and I acted like a fool. I mean, I love to scream.
I did too, but I was on Facebook for other
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. So I enjoy that as an outlet. And then one other thing, uh, I like to serve. I think serving is critically
Mhm.
important, and I always find at least two boards that I can serve on out in the community to try to make a difference. So those are ways that I can. I love my family, love to be around them and watch them be successful.
Wow, this has really been awe-inspiring. Our guest today has been Dr. Devin Stephenson. He's the president and CEO of Northwest Florida State College in Niceville, Florida, which is, by the way, a very nice place to live, by the way.
Well,
And
the reason we live here is because it's nice.
it is, I see your pictures on Facebook. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? But thank you so much for joining us. And I want our viewers to know that we will be back in the very near future with our next guest. And Dr. Stephenson, thank you so much for joining us.
Kelvin, we think the world of you. We look forward to having you always as a part of the good things that we do here. And we respect your work so much. And let me just say to you, if you ever have a bad day, if you're ever feeling down, always remember you are truly making a difference in a lot of people's lives.
Well, thank you so much. And with that, define your destiny.